Professor Ebonee Thomas. She is currently the second flute and piccolo of the Dallas Opera. She has previously served as principal flute of the Knoxville Symphony, principal flute of the Florida Grand Opera, and the second flute of the Houston Symphony. She spends her summer as a flutist with the Central City Opera in Colorado, and she's also been a guest principal with the Seattle Symphony, Fort Worth Symphony, San Antonio Symphony, and Santa Fe Opera. She is currently on faculty at the University of Texas at Austin Butler School of Music as assistant professor of flute. And her session was done at TMEA this summer, last year, and it was absolutely phenomenal. So I'm super excited that we were able to get her. So I would like to introduce to everybody Professor Ebonee Thomas.
Good morning, everybody. I'm really happy to be here. We're going to have a good time in this next hour. A small disclaimer. I'm teaching at a music camp in Vermont, and so the Wi-Fi is a little spotty. So if I lose you, I will try and log back on as soon as possible. I'm going to drop the slide presentation in the chat. I tried to put it in the Google Doc, but I don't think I had permissions or anything, so I can also do that
I'll
later.
add it for you.
Okay, great. So I'll drop it in the chat and then I will share my screen and we'll get started. Okay. Oops. Wait, let me try that again. There we go. Okay. I'll share my screen. Okay. Can everybody see the screen? Okay, wonderful. So, as Gregory said, my colleague and I, Dr. Lisa Garner Santa, we gave a presentation at TMEA about mostly about piccolo intonation, but everything applies to the flute. Because it's very fickle. You know, we're up in the stratosphere, and a lot of times, when I teach at middle schools and high schools, I'll have the band directors and they'll say, "How do I get my middle schoolers to play in tune?" And actually, my first answer is you don't. You have to kind of teach them to really put air into the instrument before you can really teach them about intonation. So I always tell my band director friends, I'm like, put them in the back row, whatever you have to do to hide that sound until they can get air into their instruments. But I'm going to take you through a presentation that'll help give you some tools and give your students some tools to be a little bit better with all of that. Okay, so my biggest thing, and I might be biased because I have a piccolo job in the opera, but it's remember the piccolo. I feel like the piccolo was written to be heard. And a lot of times, everybody wants the piccolo to be really soft. And I'm like, no, 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 that's not what it's there for. So I think one way to help your piccolos blend more is you always want to put your more advanced students on piccolo. A lot of times I feel like people kind of do the opposite. I'm not really sure why, but every issue your student has on the flute is exacerbated on the piccolo. So you really want to have your strongest student, someone who really understands the foundation of how much air to put into the flute, and that directly transfers into piccolo. The piccolo should be heard always. It's the highest, shrillest instrument, but we're taking them from shrill to skill. So put your strongest students on piccolo. I'm kind of going to blow through these so we have time for Q&A, and I'll try and do a little bit of demonstrations. But now everybody has the handout if you need to kind of refer back. So, what is good intonation? We all know this, but good intonation, especially on the flute, is having a good ear, having control of your air, being able to go from, I never want to say slow air, but I want to say from fast air to faster air. I always give the analogy of like stepping on the gas pedal. If you let your foot off a little bit, the car kind of putters back and forth. So you're either going 60 or you're going 40 miles per hour, but whatever you're doing, you're being really, really, really consistent. And I feel like even some professionals, like we oftentimes kind of miss that concept because we're thinking about different things. And lastly, embouchure flexibility. The flexibility inside of your mouth, the space between your teeth, your movement of your jaw and your lips, and the opening and closing of your aperture. So, How do we raise and lower the pitch on the flute and the piccolo? So the biggest thing that I hear people say is roll in, roll out. I want you all to use that as your last resort. That's like emergency cases only, because it affects the air flow going across the hole. So in general, on flute and piccolo, you want to have the hole pointed towards the ceiling at all times. So sometimes when you have your students roll in, then they get this teeny tiny sound and they can't get these big dynamics, and then they're flat or they're sharp from rolling out too much. So that's a last resort. Even for me, for in emergency situations, I'll roll in or out a little bit. The best way is jaw movement. So the more space you have, it's going to lower the pitch. So I always tell my students, imagine that they've got a grape or something in their back teeth. So they open the jaw, but they keep the aperture pretty small. So it looks pretty much the same. If I'm just opening my jaw, it's very much the inside of my mouth, and my aperture still looks the same. And closing the jaw a little bit. The other way is moving your lips forward a little bit or a little bit back. So everything with the intonation kind of goes with the inside of your mouth, not rolling in or out of the flute. Again, last resort. And then finally, you can really, really, really produce a lot by just playing around with the airspeed. I often give the analogy of like hot air versus cold air, because again, I don't ever want to tell people to like slow their air down too much, because you kind of get that saggy sound and then they can't play in the upper register. So, I'll give an analogy like, you're on the school bus and it's kind of a cold day and you kind of blow on the window and you write your name. It's like hot air. It's a little bit more relaxed air versus really cold air, which is a kind of faster and laser beam. So that helps raise and lower the pitch. And you can have them sort of experiment with that, whether it's just the head joint, with the flute, with the piccolo, and they have a lot of fun with that. Okay. Dynamics are also affected by your airspeed and your aperture and everything. So the louder we play, the faster our air has to be. The flute takes an incredible amount of air, as we all know, as educators and musicians. So it takes the same amount of air as the tuba, because most of the air is being blown straight across the head joint. So it's so funny. I always have these like real. I'm even teaching at this camp right now, and I have one of my students is almost 7 feet tall, and the other one's 6 feet. You have these big guys, and then they play and they put like barely any air, and it hurts my soul. It's like a hot needle in my eye. So when in doubt, have them use a ton of air, and then you can play around with the air direction to get dynamics. I'm going to get to some musical examples and tuner examples as the slide presentation progresses. So, okay. So here, it's a little bit hard to see, but here's a diagram of soft versus loud. This isn't as effective on Zoom, but I will try a little bit. So I'm just going to play like a good old B flat. We love B flat as band directors and band instruments. And I'm going to play it soft. And what I'm doing is I'm thinking of like a laser beam of narrow, soft air and really fast air. And I'm actually blowing more across the hole. So. Super steady air. Now I'm going to play that same note really loud. So I'm going to put a lot of space on my teeth. And sort of to fight gravity, I'm going to blow a little bit more down. I always say kind of towards the lip of the stand, like diagonally down. It keeps the pitch from going sharp when they get loud. And then I'm going to blow really super fast air, and my embouchure is going to be a little bit more oblong to get a bigger sound. So you have this diagram. And now, listening skills. This is my favorite part to talk about. I teach in Texas, and everybody's really big with the tuners with the clip-on mics, But I feel like where we go wrong is that when we use the mics, which are great resources, we're teaching them to tune with their eyes and not their ears. So for myself as a professional, I only kind of use the needle, looking at the needle to kind of gauge what my tendency is. Like, oh, it's a little hot, or I'm riding a little high today, so I need to just really pay attention to that and be ready to lip anything down if I need to. My favorite exercise to do are drones, because you're really training them to use their ears. You know, kids are really smart, and I feel like sometimes we take shortcuts, because you've got a room full of kids and you're short on time. But I really, really, really love using drone exercises. So this is an exercise from Moises de la Sonorite. Again, I'm kind of trying to feed you as much information in a little amount of time as possible. So you can always message me via my website, eboneethomas.com, and I can elaborate on any of this or send you little video clips of how to demonstrate these things. But how many people are familiar with Tonal Energy, the app? You can put a little thumbs up on your screen or something if you know. It is the best, like $10, $5, I don't even know how much it is, that you'll ever spend. You can use it on the iPad, you can use it on the phone, but it's really great because it has tons of drone exercises. I'm going to pull it up on my phone. And it smiles at you when you're in tune. My students love that. But it looks like this. And it's a metronome. I could probably give a 2-hour class on this app. Tonal Energy should pay me, because once I fall in love with the product, I can't stop talking about it. But the part I'm going to talk about is there's a drone feature, okay? And on the bottom, you can switch the instruments. So it'll give you the timbre of like a flute. I don't know if you can hear that very well. You can put it on, let's say, a saxophone. So it really teaches them how to listen and tune to different timbres. And so this exercise is really great, probably great to do with your entire band if you've got a room full of people. But what I'll do is I'll put it on a C drum. That's the saxophone. May as well use saxophone, right? And then I'll have them play. Oh, sorry, I gotta put it on flute because of the transposition. 1 second. Can you hear the drone? Yes. Okay, yeah. So then I'll have them play at a comfortable dynamic. And I love this exercise because the intervals widen. Because obviously, the wider the intervals get, the harder it is to return to the tonic. And then I have them do it in different dynamics because, as we very well know, the softer we play, depending on the instrument, for flutes we're flatter, for other instruments where they're sharp. And I'll have them really experiment, like go ahead and try and play it out of tune so you can hear how the waves sound and then how the waves go away. So really, really like training their ear. And then I do the same thing on piccolo, auxiliary instruments. You can have them do it on bass, clarinet, anything you want. So on piccolo, same idea. And you're kind of killing two birds with one stone too, because you're also teaching them to really have that steady, steady, steady stream of air. I love the video that I was just watching before my session with the lung trainers. I'm like, I'm going to totally try and order some of those and incorporate that into some of the practices I use. But this is from Moises de la Sonorite. Again, you can kind of use it on any band exercise that you guys do, any like long tone exercises you do. But it's really, really, really great. And like kids are smart. Like it might be rough the first couple times, but I'm just like a big proponent of them like training their ear and not just watching the needle go back and forth on the tuner. Okay. Here's another one of my favorite exercises. This is from a great piccolo method that just came out, I think about 2 years ago, by Nicola Mazzanti. It's called the Mazzanti method. It's available via PDF and a physical copy of the book, which is really great. But a lot of things that affect our intonation are tension, which is like any wind instrument, right? So I actually do this exercise quite a bit, especially when I'm going back and forth between flute and piccolo, because for me it's a great indicator of how tense I am. So sometimes I have more tension than other days, and the more tension we have, the more students try to like squeeze from their throat than blow from their abs. and people get a kick out of it because you get to sing and play at the same time. So a lot of times on flute, when we sing and play, we sing and play the pitches. So for example, I'm going to play the first measure, sing and play, which is really great again to train the ear. But what makes it hard is you use your voice as the drone. So, which is hard to do. So, what I do is we do this exercise in 3 steps. First, we do it the easiest way. We sing and play the pitches as they move. So, okay. And then we go and we play the drone. So I'll just hold the D and sing the pitches. And again, trial and error. It may take a month to get this. Some people will get it in a day. Some people will get it in an hour, depending on, how focused I am. Sometimes I don't even get it right away. But you have them hold the pitch, and then you have them sing it. And then lastly, you do the reverse. So you have them sing the D and play the pitches. So if that makes sense. And it's really fun, and it really opens up your sound too. It's a great warm up, not just for intonation, but just in general, to get them opening up with the piccolo and opening up with the flute. Yeah. Okay, next we have developing embouchure flexibility. Again, one of my favorite exercises to do and topics to talk about. Okay, so as I said earlier, pitch is controlled by movement of your embouchure, your aperture, inside of your mouth, outside of your mouth. It's really a hard concept to teach on flute because pretty much everything we do is pretty abstract, I always kind of joke around with my students. I'm like, one day somebody's going to come up with a way for us to see what's going on inside everybody's mouth as we're playing our instruments. So the biggest thing to remember about pitch control is actually tongue placement. The flute takes so much air, it's like a little bit intuitive, and people subconsciously do this, is to lift the back of our tongue up, which causes a disruption in the airflow, okay? So this is another fun exercise. Again, you can kind of do this with all of your students, but pitch bending. So I always have them play on like an open note, a C. There's only one finger down, especially if you're doing your younger students, like middle schoolers, or just students who are a little bit just needing some special attention. So I'll hold the C, and I'll have them just have fun with it and open and close their jaw to see how much pitch bending they can get. So I have them use syllables like ah, ooh, ah, ooh, ah, ooh, and they have a lot of fun with it. And it gets a little bit chaotic when you got probably 20 flute players and piccolo players doing it. But just to get them used to having that jaw flexibility. And then lastly, you can have them really roll in or out. Again, it's last resort, but sometimes it's really necessary. And a little bit goes a long way, especially on the piccolo. A little bit of movement on the piccolo is a long way on the flute. So you can have them roll it in and out. And then once they have fun with that, then I actually turn on my drones and have them find the pitch. It's also really helpful with developing the ear. I don't know if you can hear that, but it helps them train listening to the subtleties of intonation. You can also use, like half of your room as the drone, the other half, like make it into a game as the constant, and then like switch parts. That's also fun because then it kind of teaches the one side of the room that they really have to stick with keeping the pitch constant so that their peers can find the pitch. So there's like really fun exercises with that. Okay. Now, I'm going to talk about embouchure before I go to the next slide really quick. I have a really unorthodox embouchure, and I would say probably most of my students do as well. And one thing that I find, um, especially non-flute players, non-flute playing educators, is they try to get everybody to have that like textbook, like picture perfect, like you see it in a flute magazine embouchure. I play off to the side. Very, very well known players. If you Google Dennis Boryakov, he's the principal flute in the Los Angeles Philharmonic. I mean, his embouchure is like basically on at his ear. I mean, it's like totally on the side. So I would say as long as it's not really affecting the sound and they're able to really blow, I wouldn't mess. I would just have them play naturally. Don't try and fix their embouchure. A lot of students have the teardrop where their lip goes down into the V, which usually I feel like during instrument petting zoos, they're kind of steered towards some other instrument, but it does happen, or somebody just really wants to play the flute. So you would have to have them play off to the side. So you just make sure that their embouchure hole lines up with the aperture. So if someone plays off to the side, just make sure that the flute is off to the side as well. And as long as they're able to blow with a fast, steady speed of air, not a problem. I have a flute student here. I've actually never seen an embouchure this lopsided in my life, but she plays so crooked. Like she has to hold her flute like dynamically, but she produces a really beautiful sound. So I'm like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. It's more about blowing. Or you get the whole like. I have so many people come up to me and they're like, they play viola or they play saxophone or something, and they're like, I wanted to play the flute, but my band director told me my lips were too big. I'm like, hello. So lip size does not have anything to do with the flute. It's all about just kind of that upper lip muscle, and having an off center aperture, not a big problem. Okay, so fun with flexibility exercises. I'll do this one on the piccolo just to go back and forth because this is actually a piccolo exercise. So these are just octave slurs and interval slurs. Again, I like to use the drone. You kind of kill two birds with one stone, but it's again getting them to be really flexible with their embouchures. An easy way to kind of explain all this abstract stuff is just by using syllables. Ah, e, o, u. If one syllable doesn't work, have them try another one. But when you start from the low note, you want to have lots of space in your bottom teeth. So I think ah, and then ooh when I go to the octave. So ah, ooh.
Ah, ooh.
Exactly. With that steady, steady stream of air, you can put the drone on, and then they have to keep their foot on that gas pedal, or else it gets flat. So
Ah, ooh.
now, if you look closely at the second and third notes, they're very close together, right? So, as flute players, I always say, what makes us flute players? Is it because we were type A and we chose the flute, or did playing the flute make us type A? But a lot of students try to micromanage every interval. If you look and you see the A and the G, they're very close. It's just a step apart. They can stay the same. So sometimes less is more. We only want to change if we need to. So keep it steady unless we need to change it. Okay. Now the next one.
Ebony, I think there's someone writing on the screen. Could you please stop that?
I'm
Oh,
sorry.
can you guys see that? Sorry.
I don't know what that is.
Oh, sorry. I was just sorry. I was writing. I didn't know you guys could see that. I apologize.
Oh, I see. Oh, okay. We love a good note taking session. All good. Okay, so the next one we go from high to low. So we go from the ooh, ah, and then maybe leave it. You don't have to change to the next interval necessarily. And I'm going to try and play a little closer to my camera so you can maybe see my aperture. how I'm dropping my jaw. It's a very subtle movement, but it's a big one. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about jaw movement because depending on the school of teaching, some people don't actually talk about jaw movement. They talk about lip movement. To me, it's kind of all the same. Move your lip forward, move your jaw forward, drop your bottom lip, open, So sometimes you'll hear people only talk about lip movement. To me, it's kind of one and the same because when your jaw moves, your lip moves a little bit. So again, great exercise with the drones. You can have a lot of fun with that. Okay. Fine tuning. Okay. So I do this exercise actually even with my college students. I will have them make 3 columns of charts, okay? And I will make them put every single note on the piccolo or the flute. I usually do this with piccolo because by the time they get to UT, they should hopefully know enough about intonation on their flutes. I will have them make a list of every single note in all 3 octaves, and then I will have them put, on the flute, the D flat in the staff tends to be a little bit sharp, so they get to know their tendencies. And then after I do that, they have the chart and they have it in their practice journal just to go back to. Then we talk about actual intervals. And what we did at TMEA, I'm here by my lonesome, so I can't do it here, is Dr. Santa would play the bottom line on flute, and then I would play the top one, and we would practice. Because a lot of times, timbre is a factor. You get used to tuning at home with the tuner, and then you come into band or orchestra and you have to tune with a violin or the tuba or the trumpet, and then people are a little bit lost. So this could be fun to do not only with just your flutes, but to spread it across the ensemble. So we play these intervals, and you can hear sort of the difference tones sort of buzzing in your ear. And we go through this whole thing, and then we switch roles. So you can have your students do this. And again, this is all, I believe everything is in the slideshows in the chat, and it's also in the Google Drive. So you can print this out for your students. Okay, difference tones. This is my favorite. There are entire books that people have composed creating a trio with 2 flutes playing difference tones. Again, since I'm by myself, I can't do it. But what happens is one person will play flute 1, the other person plays flute 2, and if you're in tune, there's a little buzz in your ear, and it'll create this difference tone that's down here on the bottom, and it creates sort of this melodic duet, and it's really, really fun. And the more in tune it is, the louder the buzz is. And I love doing this exercise because it really, really helps with the fine tuning. And I'll have my students come to me and they're like, I can hear it. It's like a buzzing in my ear. But if you're not aware of it, it kind of goes away. It's super weird. I mean, I don't know. Like, it's a strange phenomenon, but it's really fun. So, grab your assistant band director or your flute playing friend or 2 of your flute students and play these intervals, and you can hear it'll produce these notes here on the bottom. And it's just a really, really, really great way, because once they hear the difference tone, it'll get louder when they're in tune. So, one person is the constant. And I always say, whoever the constant is, they're in tune, even if they're not in tune. I mean, hopefully they're in tune, but they're in tune, and then have the one person adjust, and you can hear it sort of like buzzing in your ear. Super great. Really, really great. And this might be a little bit more for more advanced players, or more the students who really understand the concept of like a little bit of adjustment goes a long way, if that makes sense. Okay, so now intonation and balance as a flute section. I approach, especially on the piccolo, because it's so fickle. If I'm moving around on the piccolo, if I'm playing here, I drop my jaw this much, and it's a difference of 25 cents. So you have to really get used to the subtleties. So for me, a lot of interval training is super, 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 super helpful. I will guide off of a previous note. Like if I'm playing a half step, I will use the previous note as a guide to stay in tune. I do a lot of like chord studying, you know, in a major triad, you want to lower your thirds. So I encourage my students to, you know, especially with tonal energy, you can build a triad and then tune your thirds, or you can put the root and the fifth, and then you play. I'm serious. I could literally give like a 2 hour discussion on on tonal energy. So I'll save room at the end for any questions about tonal energy or any of the things, you know, I kind of went through pretty quickly because I want to save time for questions. Um, but again, matching unisons and octaves. You know, I even with my grad students, you know, I'll have them play when they're playing sonatas or whatever, and they're playing with piano, and I can hear them tuning with piano, and I can see the wheels stop turning. You know, and I'm like, are you comfortable tuning? And a lot of them will say no. I mean, it's hard, you know, depending, the closer you are in intonation, the harder it is to hear, you know? So I always give the analogy of listening to string players tune in orchestra. You know, they'll start and they'll purposely move the strings in and out of tune and then dip and find it. And I don't think there's anything wrong, especially with our younger players, maybe starting purposely flat or purposely sharp so they can really hear the difference when it really is in tune. And then after they're used to tuning unisons, I would have them maybe switch to tuning octaves because it's still the same pitch. And then when they're more comfortable with that, tuning their fifths and then tuning their thirds. Okay. All right. So now I'm going to just kind of talk about like nitty gritty things. And I don't think this is just specific to the piccolo players, but I actually think everybody should do this. But hearing health is so important. And I think everybody should have both earplugs in personally in band rehearsals. If not, at least the right earplug for piccolo players because all of the loudest part is going into our ear. I'm like, it doesn't even have to be the fancy earplugs. It can be those foam earplugs. You can use swimmers earplugs. You can get custom earplugs. You can get one step up. They're like $10 earplugs at Walgreens. And people are always like, but I can't hear. But your ears do adjust. I actually have custom earplugs, and when I first put them in, I'm like, oh, what am I supposed to do with this? But your ears do adjust. So just tell them they'll get used to it, especially in marching band, especially for anybody sitting right in front of trumpets or percussion. Earplugs, 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 earplugs. And personally for me, especially on piccolo, when I have my earplugs in, I can actually tune better because it's kind of filtering out all that extraneous timbres and sounds, not just with me, but everything around me, and I can really hear the core of my sound. So do an experiment and have them put in their earplugs as they tune. Yeah. The other thing with tuning, especially in large ensembles, is dynamics. Sometimes I think that we think it's an intonation issue when it's a dynamic issue. So maybe a mezzo forte is going to be good enough for a forte sound. You know, the more in tune, the better the dynamics work. So I would play around with switching around with dynamics. You know, piccolo, obviously, every time my music director looks at me and tells me to play softer, like my eye quivers a little bit, but got to do what you got to do, right? I mean, sometimes I'm not going to lie. I just kind of squint and make it look like I'm playing softer. And then I do the exact same thing. And he's like, that's perfect. And I'm like, little do you know, joke's on you, sir. I played the exact same thing. But having like a really unified dynamic will actually help with the pitch. There's usually that one flute player or piccolo player or trumpet player or whatever who's like super confident and they're playing louder, and that can throw off the intonation balance. So getting really harmonious dynamics is going to help you have like a uniform sound. Also, the better the sound is when they're playing, usually tends to be more in tune. So sometimes just telling them to play with their most beautiful sound will help them play in tune. And obviously, lastly, airstream. Airstream, 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 airstream. So I'm going to talk about airstream a little bit. And I don't have this here with me because I'm at camp. But, oh my gosh, what do you call it? It's a Pneumo Pro. Has anybody ever heard of a Pneumo Pro? Love the Numo Pro. I used to teach at a middle school in Frisco, Texas, and I convinced the band directors to buy enough for the entire beginner flute class because everything is so abstract, you know what I mean? So we would have the beginners take their head joints off. For those of you who don't know what a Numo Pro is, it's basically like a little plastic flute head joint, and it has a little apparatus that swings out in front, and it has these fans on there so they can actually see their air direction. So if they're blowing down, the lower fan will spin. And also, I think students are always shocked at how fast their air has to be. And so I will have them play an entire etude or an entire band piece on the Numo Pro to make sure that the fans are always spinning. It also is a great feature because, well, who has, I don't know, pennies are obsolete now, right? But you can put a coin on the top to make sure that they're keeping the hole pointed towards the ceiling and balance. It's such a great tool. They're relatively inexpensive. And I mean, again, as a full-fledged professional adult who's been playing the flute for a million years, I even use it too. I actually also like to use them if I'm like in a hotel room or something, or if it's like late at night and I don't want to keep, like, you know, I'm teaching at this camp, I've got housemates, I don't want to wake anybody up. It's a great visual tool for the students. Okay, so I'm going to talk about sort of air volume versus air speed and all of that, and then I'll save time for questions, or if you want me to go back and go into more depth about anything I talked about. So sometimes students get confused between air speed and air volume, right? And so I give the analogy, you've got a boba tea straw, which is really big, right? And then you have a regular straw, which is like regular. And then you have like a coffee straw, which isn't even really a straw, it's like a stirrer, right? So if you have a boba straw and you blow, you use all of your air, you use a ton of air, you don't get to go very far, right? But then if you use a regular straw, you can go a little further. And then if you use the coffee stir, you can go even further. So air volume, you want to use as much air as possible, but how you get them to sustain the note longer is they have to have a teeny tiny aperture. Especially you'll see with your beginners, they have this big like oblong, and then they can't play. So an easy, simple exercise you can do with just the head joint or with the whole flute is I'll have them bring the flute up, and then they start with their mouth closed, their lips closed, breathe in through your nose, and then they produce like a P sound, like, and that's how tiny the aperture is. I feel like that's a really hard concept, especially for people who've, you know, been wanting to play instruments all their life, and then they have this whole concept of how to blow into a saxophone or blow into a trumpet. So I'll have them start, mouth closed, breathe in through the nose, and then I really get creative. You know, the analogies tend to work, especially with the younger ones. I'm like, if you got a sunflower seed or a popcorn kernel or something, and you've got a sibling who's annoying you and they're sitting across the table, we don't do this literally because we'll get in trouble, and you want to blow so that popcorn kernel hits them in the forehead. It works like a charm, trust me, you know? So that, and then I tell them that when you're doing this on the head joint, even though we're blowing across the head joint, the air has to flow all the way to the end of the tube, right? Then imagine when you put the whole flute together, it has to blow all the way through the end of the tube. And like, let it sound bad, you know, let them just get used to really blowing, and then you can do the aperture exercises, if that makes sense. So, and then lastly, I will talk about how vibrato sort of affects the intonation. Again, with my favorite tool, in tonal energy, there's this analysis right here, and you can play and it'll show the waves. And so we want them to always go above the axis and below the axis. And again, it's just a good visual tool. And I've had band directors plug this in and put it on like a monitor so they can see it. They plug it into the big speaker so everybody can hear the drones. but it's like the easiest and fastest way for them to see, because if the vibrato is too much on the higher axis, which would sound like this, then the pitch goes really sharp. And then if it's too slow and low, it goes really flat. But if you have them oscillating between the upper and the lower, then they get this really beautiful in tune and really like equal sound. Again, I can talk about vibrato for an hour, and I'm happy to at some other point in time. But that's sort of like the crash course of all of the tools you can use, not only to have your flutes sounding better and getting them more comfortable with intonation, but it's also like just really fun for them, you know. So yeah, I wanted to leave time for any questions that people had, or if you need me to elaborate, or if you needed more resources. So maybe I'll stop sharing so that I can see everybody, if that's okay. Oh, and then, oh, sorry, before I stop sharing, I'm going to go through all the slides that we put in here. We have all the resources, all the excerpts that we put on here if you wanted to find where they came from. And then method books that we suggest. This Trevor Y, these practice books, these are the ones that have the difference tones duets in there, which are really fun. And then we suggested some great student model piccolos, mostly the ones that sort of last with them sort of dropping them on the floor and rolling them on their lap and all of that stuff. And that are they're not too expensive to repair, all of that stuff. And we've got the Tonal Energy Tuner app is on here. There's we put some fingering charts in here. Alternate fingerings are really big for piccolo. There are just some traditional fingerings for flute fingerings that just don't work on piccolo. And so we have them here. So it's like some of these are a quick fix. For example, this D natural right here, number 4, I actually only use that fingering. I don't even bother with a regular D fingering. Some upper register fingerings, the notes speak better and they're more in tune. So we made sure to put those in here. We've got the intonation chart guidelines in here. Here's the chart that I was talking about that I have my students use. And they can just mark like with an up arrow, or they can put like a neutral that it just tends to be in tune. And it helps them sort of memorize the nature of their instrument, because the more they know the nature of their instrument, the easier it is for them to tune with a trumpet or a saxophone or their other flute and piccolo players. And yes, so that is the presentation. I hope you got a little something out of it, but now I can answer any questions or anything that wasn't clear with people.
Okay, someone asked in the chat let me get to the question. Students with a teardrop, does it matter which side they should play off of?
That's a great question. It doesn't necessarily matter, but when they play, let's see if I can move. You'll kind of see where a little bit of air may pucker on one side, and that's probably the more relaxed side of their face. So I would choose the other side. That's probably the best way to describe. And just have them blow like a fast speed of air, and you can automatically kind of tell which side they favor. But it doesn't really matter. For me, I would say the majority of mine tends to be on the right side. Not really sure why, but it tends to be on the right side, but it doesn't matter. And again, you can kind of experiment. You can pick both sides, and whichever one they get a better sound or they get a faster, more steady airspeed, pick that side. Yeah.
I know you spoke about this at TMEA, but when you're trying to get your flute players to open up and get a more robust or fuller sound, let's say in your performing band you only have 4 flutes, but you really want them to sound like 7 flute players.
Yes.
What are some things that you would do with the oral cavity to help them to produce those bigger sounds?
Yeah, great question. Okay, so I actually learned this from my teacher used to actually give me like carrots or a cork or a grape, but me being paranoid these days, I'm like, somebody's gonna choke on that. And so I actually learned this from a saxophone professor. I actually have one right here. So I take a piece of cork and I cut it about yay thick. You can make it thinner for the younger ones because it's going to be a shock to the system. And then this is just dental floss. And then I put the loop with a pin through there, and then I will tie a pencil around the end of it just as an anchor so that they don't accidentally swallow it. I'm just paranoid. And then you have them put it in the mouth. Ugh. Put it back here, and then the pencil dangle so that they don't choke on it, and then have them play. And this is really great because it forces them to engage their upper lip to keep that small aperture. Because usually what happens when they have that really loose oblong aperture, they're not engaging the upper lip. So they want to pull the upper lip down. I often give the analogy of like a rabbit. You want to stretch that upper lip to close off the aperture. Do you see how my lip, I don't have a traditional embouchure. But I just make sure that the hole lines up with where my air is. And so they'll have to do a lot of like mirror practicing. And right off the bat, when you do that, you can just have them bring it up and down. Because, some of them may be way over here. But I love doing that. And it's going to sound terrible when you put that cork in there, but it's going to give them that sort of physical reassurance of just how much space they need to put in there. So I love doing that and just having them really, 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 really drop their jaw. Yeah.
Awesome. Someone else asked, what suggestions for teaching vibrato to younger players?
Ooh, that's a great one. So I would say first get them really, really, really blowing into their flutes. So many of band directors that I used to work for would be like, your flutes have the best sounds. And I'm like, because they don't even know what a bad sound is. You know what I mean? Like, kids are smart. So if you don't do any shortcuts right away, but what you do, a really simple exercise where you don't need a book or anything for, is what my teacher calls gut puffs. So what you do is you have them articulate into the flute without using the tongue. So it's like almost like coughing into the flute, like ha, ha, ha. So like on a B flat, you want to have them do it on an easy note, a note in the staff. So, and what'll happen is if their air's too slow, they'll do this. They can't get a long note. So it's really like they have to engage in their abs. I give the analogy, you're on the marching band field or you're on the playground and your friend's way on the other side and you're like, hey, I'll meet you at the swings and two. If you're yelling from your abs. So you have them do gut puffs. And then I'll turn on the metronome and I'll have them do eighth notes. So and then I say, if I were to notate that would be staccato, right? There's space in between there, right? And then I do triplets. Right? And then I'll have them do 16th notes. And you start slow. I start at like quarter note equals 50, and then do 60, 70, then 80. No faster than 80, because then it's just like nanny goat vibrato. Then I'll have them go back, and I'm like, now we're going to sew those beats together. So and I tell them, I'm like, this is not about pretty vibrato right now. It's like you're lifting weights before the big game. It should really sound really seasick. So you go from fast air to faster air. I never say slow, because then they start playing flat or like things get a little complicated. And then I have them do triplets. And then 16th notes. Oh, wait, is there, yeah. Now, here's the trick. Might be a little controversial. When you start them, the vibrato pulses are strictly from your abs. The faster it goes, it is partially your throat. I don't care what anybody says. But the trick is they still have to support the air with their abs. So the faster the vibrato is, it's a combination of your throat and your ab muscles. But when you're slow, it's just like someone's kind of like little jabs in the belly, if that makes sense. And then once they're comfortable with that, may take a week, may take a month, may take a semester, then I have them sort of incorporate it in a scale, because the hardest thing is like gluing the vibrato together. So I'll have them do And then I start taking away beats. Again, may take a week, a month, a year, whatever. And then if you want to have them incorporated in the music, like say they're playing, I don't know, let's say a dotted quarter note. I will have them first just pulse the vibrato. It's not going to sound great, but it gives them the practice of like vibrating on a note. So you can have them, and it helps actually with counting too, because you can give them a subdivision. So, does that make sense? And then when they're comfortable with that, they can pull 16th notes. And then they kind of morph into the free flowing vibrato. So again, I think it's just all about letting them kind of sound bad when they're first getting used to it, and then everything will sort of become a little bit more intuitive. I hope that was helpful.
That was awesome. And you can just feel free to just keep playing for us all day long if you want to.
I'll put my website in the chat because I know I like blew through a lot of stuff. So you can always message me there. There's also some resources there. Happy to answer any questions. I've had band directors, they'll be like, help with this fingering, and then I'll just play a little, I'll record a little video and like send it back to you. So I'm totally happy to help in any way that I can.
That is so amazing. Again, thank you for being here with us today and sharing your knowledge with all of us. It was absolutely amazing.
My
Uh,
pleasure. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. So now I will kick it over to Adam to show our sponsor presentation.